The 19th plenary meeting of the General Assembly is called to order. The General Assembly will now consider the report of the Fifth Committee on Agenda Item 143 entitled Scale of Assessments for the Apportionment of the Expenses of the United Nations. Contained in Document A, Slide 79, Slide 390. The positions of delegations regarding the recommendation of the committee have been made clear in the committee and are reflected in the relevant official records. Therefore, if there is no proposal under Rule 66 of the Rules of Procedure, may I take it that the General Assembly decides not to discuss the report of the committee which is before the Assembly today. It is so decided. Statements will therefore be limited to explanations or vote. May I remind members that in accordance with Decision 34/401, a delegation should, as far as possible, explain its vote only once, that is either in the committee or in the plenary meeting, unless that delegation's vote in plenary meeting is different from its vote in the committee, and that explanations of vote are limited to 10 minutes and should be made by delegations from their seats. Before we begin to take action on the recommendation contained in the report of the committee, I should like to advise representatives that we are going to proceed to take a decision in the same manner as was done in the committee, unless notified otherwise in advance. The Assembly has before it a draft resolution recommended by the committee in its report. I give the floor to Afghanistan.
Mr. President, distinguished delegates, my delegation wishes to place on record our vigorous disapproval and deep disappointment regarding the action on draft resolution A/79/390 and the report of the Committee on Contributions concerning its inability to reach an agreement on Afghanistan's request for exemptions under Article 19. Despite the compelling justifications we have provided, grounded in the harsh realities faced by Afghanistan, our plea have unfortunately been disregarded. The Committee on Contributions' failure to reinstate Afghanistan's right to vote and grant an exemption under Article 19 is both deeply concerning and disheartening for my country. We recognize the importance of member states fulfilling their financial obligations to the United Nations. However, Afghanistan is currently enduring extraordinary political, social, and economic challenges that severely limit our capacity to meet these obligations. These challenges largely stem from the Taliban's failure and unwillingness to address the ongoing crisis, break the impasse, and engage constructively with the national and international calls for a fair, responsible, and inclusive system of governance. This includes respect for human rights and dignity, the rightful inclusion of women in all aspects of society, and a commitment to counter-terrorism efforts. The situation is further compounded by geopolitical tensions and the absence of a strong, cohesive international approach to addressing Afghanistan's crisis. Our situation is not one of neglect or unwillingness. Rather, it is linked to circumstances beyond our control. Article 19 of the UN Charter acknowledges such cases and provides for exemptions. We firmly believe our case meets these criteria. What concerns us even more is that the work of the Committee on Contributions, which has a well-defined technical and advisory role, appears to have taken on a political dimension. While we appreciate the understanding and recommendations of some committee members in support of our waiver request, it is regrettable that others, particularly from the region, who are entrusted to act with independence and objectivity, have allowed political considerations to influence their decisions. This has undermined the fairness of the process and raises serious concerns about the impartiality that should guide the committee's deliberations. This was the first time we requested a waiver under Article 19 with valid justifications, and it is disappointing that it was not given proper considerations due to political biases from a few committee members. Regrettably, the report of the Committee on Contributions also fails to accurately reflect our oral and written statements presented during the committee meeting. We have attached a full copy of our statement delivered on June 14, 2024 for the record. Afghanistan remains steadfast in its commitment to the United Nations and the principles upon which it stands. Denying us the right to vote at this critical juncture further isolates us and limits our ability to engage meaningfully in the work of this assembly. Moreover, it sends a troubling signal that political motivations can interfere with decisions that should be based on principles of impartiality, fairness, and objectivity. Mr. President, Afghanistan has been an active and committed member of the United Nations since our membership in October 1946. We will continue to uphold the principles and objectives of the UN Charter. We acknowledge our obligation to meet our financial responsibilities to the organization and will make all necessary efforts to fulfill these payments as soon as possible. In conclusion, I would like to stress that despite these challenges, we will continue to represent the state and the people of Afghanistan, defend their rights and voices, especially voices of women, and constructively contribute to the international efforts aimed at achieving a political settlement based on the will of Afghan people, ultimately striving for a lasting peace and stability in Afghanistan. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Afghanistan. The Assembly will now take a decision on the draft resolution entitled Scale of Assessments for the Apportionment of the Expenses of the United Nations, request under Article 19 of the Charter, recommended by the committee in its report. The committee adopted the draft resolution without a vote. May I take it that the Assembly wishes to do the same? It is so decided. The Assembly has thus concluded this stage of its consideration of Agenda Item 143. The General Assembly will consider Sub-Item C of Agenda Item 115 for the election of members of the Human Rights Council to replace those members whose term of office expires on 31st December 2024. The outgoing members are as follows: Argentina, Benin, Cameroon, Eritrea, Finland, Gambia, Honduras, India, Kazakhstan, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malaysia, Montenegro, Paraguay, Qatar, Somalia, United Arab Emirates, and United States of America. in accordance with operative paragraph 7 of Resolution 60/251 of 15th May 2006, these member states are eligible for immediate re-election except those who have served 2 consecutive terms, namely Argentina, Cameroon, Eritrea, India, and Somalia. The 18 vacant seats are distributed among the regional groups as follows: 5 seats for the African states, 5 seats for the Asia-Pacific states, 2 seats for the Eastern European states, 3 seats for the Latin American and Caribbean states, and 3 seats for the Western European and other states. The General Assembly will now proceed to the election of members of the Human Rights Council. In accordance with Resolution 60/251, membership in the Council shall be open to all states members of the United Nations, and the members of the Council shall serve for a period of 3 years. The members of the Council shall be elected directly and individually by secret ballot by the majority of the members of the General Assembly. Accordingly, 97 votes constitute a majority in the General Assembly that has a membership of 193 states. The following states will continue to be members of the Human Rights Council: Albania, Algeria, Bangladesh, Belgium, Brazil, Bulgaria, Burundi, Chile, China, Costa Rica, Cote d'Ivoire, Cuba, Dominican Republic, France, Georgia, Germany, Ghana, Indonesia, Japan, Kuwait, Kyrgyzstan, Malawi, Maldives, Morocco, Kingdom of the Netherlands, Romania, South Africa, Sudan, and Vietnam. The names of these states, therefore, should not appear on the ballot papers. This election will be held in accordance with the relevant rules of procedure of the General Assembly on elections. In this regard, Rule 94 shall be applied. Consistent with the practice of the General Assembly, if more than the required number of member states have obtained the votes of the majority of the members of the Assembly on the same ballot, those member states which have obtained the largest number of votes above the required majority will be considered as elected, up to the number of seats to be filled. Also, consistent with past practice, if due to a tie vote, it becomes necessary to determine a candidate or candidates to be elected, or that would proceed to the next round of restricted balloting, there will be a special restricted ballot limited to those candidates that have obtained an equal number of votes. May I take it that the General Assembly agrees with the proposed way forward? It is so decided. Regarding the candidates, the Secretariat has been informed that for the 5 vacant seats for African states, 5 endorsed candidates have been communicated, namely Benin, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, the Gambia, and Kenya. For the 5 vacant seats for Asia-Pacific states, 6 candidates have been communicated, namely Cyprus, the Marshall Islands, Qatar, the Republic of Korea, Saudi Arabia, and Thailand. For the 2 vacant seats for Eastern European states, 2 candidates have been communicated, namely Czechia and North Macedonia. For the 3 vacancies for Latin American and Caribbean states, 3 endorsed candidates have been communicated, namely the plurinational state of Bolivia, Colombia, and Mexico. For the 3 vacancies for Western European and other states, 3 candidates have been communicated, namely Iceland, Spain, and Switzerland. Voluntary pledges and commitments made by member states in accordance with operative paragraph 8 of Resolution 60/251 were issued as official documents of the 79th session of the General Assembly. Before we begin the voting process, I should like to remind members that pursuant to Rule 88 of the Rules of Procedure of the General Assembly, no representative shall interrupt the voting except on a point of order on the actual conduct of the voting. Any announcements, including those concerning withdrawals of candidatures, should therefore be made prior to the commencement of the voting process, that is to say, before the announcement of the beginning of the voting process. In addition, ballot papers will only be given to the delegates seated directly behind the country's nameplate. We shall now begin the voting process. Ballot papers will now be distributed and the voting has thus begun. In accordance with Resolution 71/323 of 8 September 2017, the names of the states that have been communicated to the Secretariat at least 48 hours prior to the election today have been printed on the ballot papers for each of the regional groups. Also, additional blank lines corresponding to the number of vacant seats to be filled for each of the regional groups have been provided on the ballot papers for inscribing other names if desirable. I request representatives to use only those ballot papers that have been distributed and to put an X in the boxes next to the names whom they wish to vote for, and or write other eligible names on the blank lines. If the box next to the name of a state is checked, the name of that state does not have to be repeated on the blank line. The total number of checked boxes and or handwritten names should not exceed the number of vacant seats to be filled as indicated on the ballot paper. A ballot paper will be declared invalid if it contains more names of eligible member states from the relevant region than the number of seats allocated to it. Accordingly, for the ballot papers marked A for African states, the total number of checked boxes and or handwritten names should not exceed 5. For the ballot papers marked B for Asia-Pacific states, the total number of checked boxes and or handwritten names should not exceed 5. For the ballot papers marked C for Eastern European states, the total number of check boxes and or handwritten names should not exceed 2. For the ballot papers marked D for Latin American and Caribbean states, the total number of check boxes and or handwritten names should not exceed 3. And for the ballot papers marked E for Western European and other states, the total number of check boxes and or handwritten names should not exceed 3. A ballot paper will be declared invalid if none of the names of the member states on that ballot paper for which votes were cast belongs to the relevant region, or if all the votes on the ballot are for member states that are not eligible for election. In this regard, I record that the following member states are not eligible for election. Member states that will continue to be members of the Council next year. Member states that are currently serving their second consecutive term in the Council. If a ballot paper for a region contains one of the following, the ballot remains valid, but the votes for those member states will not be counted. Member states that do not belong to the region concerned, or member states that continue to be members of the Council next year, or member states that are currently serving their second consecutive term in the Council. If a ballot paper contains any notation other than votes in favor of eligible member states, those notations will be disregarded. I invite the representatives of the following states to serve as tellers and to accompany the conference officers as they collect the ballot papers: Andorra, Armenia, India, Monaco, Togo, and Uruguay. Please proceed to collect the ballot papers. May I request delegations who have not voted to do so now by approaching the podium to cast their votes. The voting is now closed. No more ballot papers will be accepted. In the interest of time, the General Assembly will now proceed to consider the other item announced in the United Nations Journal while the ballots are being counted. The General Assembly has thus concluded this stage of its consideration of sub-item C of Agenda Item 115. The General Assembly will resume its consideration of Agenda Item 127 entitled Global Health and Foreign Policy, to hear explanations of votes after the vote on Draft Resolution A/79/L5 entitled Political Declaration of the High-Level Meeting on Antimicrobial Resistance. Before giving the floor for explanations of vote after the vote, may I remind delegations that explanations of vote are limited to 10 minutes and should be made by delegations from their seats. I give the floor to Hungary on behalf of the European Union.
Mr. President, Excellencies, I have the honor to deliver this explanation of position on behalf of the European Union and its member states. Montenegro, Serbia, Albania, Ukraine, the Republic of Moldova, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Georgia, and San Marino align themselves with this statement. I would like to begin by warmly thanking Malta and Barbados for their strong leadership in this process and their excellent work leading us in the work on the political declaration endorsed by our leaders last week. Ladies and gentlemen, the high-level meeting 10 days ago was a resounding success. The hard work and constructive engagement by all of us culminated in an ambitious outcome and global agenda for cooperation, bringing AMR back into the spotlight, raising direly needed awareness of this global threat. This awareness is the crucial first step to prevention and to encouraging more appropriate, prudent and responsible use of antimicrobials, as well as securing the necessary financial support. The declaration reinforces our commitment to strengthen policies and best practices for addressing AMR through a multi-sectoral and whole-of-government approach, building successfully on the 2016 AMR political declaration. The declaration puts a strong focus on the need to urgently develop, update, effectively implement and finance national action plans, recognizing the One Health approach as the way forward. One Health national action plans must comprise clear commitments and must form the strategic backbone of each nation's work to curb AMR. In the EU, we have just adopted the second edition of the European Joint Action on Antimicrobial Resistance and healthcare-associated infections, with the ambitious goal of changing the world's approach to antimicrobial resistance through a One Health perspective in firm national action plans. In declaration, we have agreed on numerous targets, many of which are to be achieved by 2030, with clear goals set for action at both global and national levels. Effective government mechanisms must be in place to ensure accountability, and member states will need to assess their progress throughout the implementation process. The work of the new independent panel for evidence for action to be set up in 2025 will serve as a valuable guide on action against AMR. In the European Union, we have successfully applied this collaborative approach through a dedicated framework, the AMR One Health Network. We are pleased that the quadripartite AMR multi-stakeholder partnership platform will play a similar role globally. Furthermore, the biennial ministerial conferences on antimicrobial resistance will provide an essential platform for evaluating our collective progress at a global and national level. To implement the agreed commitments, we need sufficient financial resources. The European Union has been and remains a major contributor to the existing funds alongside others, and is looking forward to broadening the donor base of the AMR multi-partner trust fund and to the more efficient use of resources. With regard to the innovation and access, both push and pull incentives should allow us to find the breakthrough antimicrobials we urgently need. The EU and its 27 member states fully support the recognized potential and the importance of technology transfers, which are voluntary and based on mutually agreed terms, fully aligned with international intellectual property rules. Mr. President, Excellencies, it is our understanding that the UN and its member states do not endorse coerced transfer of technology that contravenes the fundamental principles of the IP law and contract law. The process must be conducted in a way that respects the interests of all parties, fostering a climate of progress and creativity without compromise. Innovators, creators, stakeholders, and recipients of the technology in every country and region deserve such protection and peace of mind. The EU and its member states have consistently upheld this principle across all UN contexts. Therefore, that tech transfer has to occur voluntarily and on terms which are mutually agreed. And we must therefore distance ourselves from any interpretations that are not aligned with this principle. This understanding also extends to paragraph 87 in this declaration, which should incorporate the necessary caveats already agreed in several other UN processes to ensure a balanced approach between protection and access. We already have shown flexibility in the interest of reaching consensus on many other paragraphs that we do not fully agree with, in particular paragraph 66 and paragraph 70. Finally, the EU is fully and unreservedly committed to the overarching objective of this political declaration, which is to enhance global response to effectively address antimicrobial resistance. While this political declaration is a critical step, we call upon all member states to aim higher and show more ambition in this critical phase of implementation. We will continue to work together with all members in bilateral, regional and multilateral fora with local tripartite organizations and at the UN to translate commitments into actions and results so that by 2030 we achieve the goal we set today. In the European Union, we are ready to play our part to the full and support others. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Hungary. I give the floor to Uganda on behalf of the Group of 77 and China.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the Group of 77 in China, an explanation of position following the adoption of the draft resolution A/79/L5 on the political declaration of the high-level meeting on antimicrobial resistance under Agenda Item 127. At the outset, we extend our appreciation to the co-facilitators from the Permanent Mission of Barbados and Malta for their tireless efforts in guiding the complex negotiations. The group also wishes to thank the Permanent Mission of Indonesia in New York for their support to the chair in facilitating substantive and productive negotiations over the course of nearly 5 months. Their dedication has been instrumental in ensuring that the draft reflects key priorities of the Global South, including equitable access to antimicrobials, vaccines, and diagnostics. AMR is a global health and development challenge, particularly for developing countries, where it undermines progress in combating diseases like HIV, tuberculosis, hepatitis, Ebola, and malaria. The adoption of this declaration is an important step towards fostering coordinated multi-sectoral action to tackle AMR. We have joined consensus on this resolution as we accord great importance to the global commitments it represents in addressing these challenges and ensuring that developing countries receive the necessary support to strengthen their capacities in this fight. Mr. President, we welcome the emphasis placed on capacity building and technology transfer in the political declaration, which are vital for enabling local production of antimicrobial medicines. However, the group strongly urges the international community to recognize the damaging effects of unilateral coercive measures on the ability of developing countries to combat AMR. Such measures limit access to antimicrobial medicines and weaken health systems, compounding the difficulties faced by countries in special situations. We call for the elimination of these measures to support the global fight against AMR and ensure no one is left behind. We welcome the acknowledgement of the importance of multi-sectoral efforts to foster cooperation across human and animal health, as well as environmental and other relevant sectors to tackle antimicrobial resistance. The Group of 77 in China is encouraged by the commitment to mobilize $100 million through the Antimicrobial Resistance Multi-Partner Trust Fund, but we strongly emphasize the need for sustainable financing and strong international cooperation to ensure the full implementation of national AMR action plans. The economic consequences of AMR are deeply concerning, with the potential to add $1 trillion in healthcare costs annually by 2050 and cause global GDP losses of up to $3.4 trillion per year by 2030. Addressing these challenges will require stronger international cooperation, increased financial support, and greater capacity building in research, development, and innovation, particularly in developing countries. AMR requires a comprehensive approach, and the political declaration rightly highlights the importance of improved water, sanitation, and hygiene infrastructure and appropriate antimicrobial use across sectors to prevent the spread of this resistance. Infection prevention and control measures in healthcare settings are equally essential to limit the transmission of resistant infections. Mr. President, in conclusion, we are confident that the upcoming 4th Ministerial Conference on Antimicrobial Resistance to be held in Saudi Arabia from 15th to 16th November 2024 will serve as a key platform for moving from declaration to concrete actions. with the theme Accelerating Actions Through Multi-Sectoral Partnerships for the Containment of AMR. This conference presents an opportunity to strengthen global cooperation and ensure that commitments are made effectively translated into meaningful progress across human, animal health, and environmental sectors. As we look forward to the next high-level meeting in 2029, we reaffirm our commitment to multilateralism in the fight against AMR. I thank you.
I thank Uganda. I give the floor to the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. President, the Islamic Republic of Iran would like to extend its appreciation to Your Excellency for convening the high-level meeting on AMR. We express our gratitude to the permanent representative of Malta and Barbados and their respective teams for their efforts in facilitating the consultation process. My delegation associates itself with the statement delivered by the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela on behalf of the Group of Friends in Defense of the Charter of the United Nations, and a statement delivered by Uganda on behalf of Group of 77 and China, and would like to add the following points in its national capacity. The delegation of the Islamic Republic of Iran has engaged constructively in the negotiation process of this political declaration in an effort to reach a balanced and acceptable outcome document. The United Nations, as per Charter, is based on the sovereign equality of all its member states. Hence, the views and priorities of member states must be respected. Nonetheless, we witnessed during the negotiations of the said political declaration that this very fundamental principle was frequently disregarded. Priorities of a few were accommodated at the expense of many developing member states, and agreed upon language was altered for the benefit of a few. Regrettably, in general, we are of the view that this is an unbalanced text that ignores the concern and priorities of a large number of countries by one-sidedness, deliberate obscurity, and ignorance, which unfortunately prevailed over neutrality, transparency, and inclusiveness. As a case in point, and of particular importance to my delegation, we're extremely disappointed that the political declaration fails to address the detrimental effects of unilateral coercive measures. It is vital to uphold our commitment that no country or individual should be left behind. Ensuring that all individuals, particularly those in developing countries, have unimpeded and timely access to appropriate treatment helps mitigate the risk associated with improper antimicrobial use. These risks are heightened when people's access to medicine, vaccines, and medical equipment is cut off. As highlighted by the Special Rapporteur on the negative impact of unilateral coercive measures on the enjoyment of human rights, UCMs result in violation of all categories, economic, social, and cultural rights, including the rights to life, health, food, and adequate standard of living, education, and the right to development. These actions are inhuman and, more importantly, are felt daily by innocent people who lack access to essential medicine, medical products, and vaccines as a result of such unlawful measures. Such actions not only undermine the principles enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations and international law, but also severely violate human rights and unfortunately continue to inflict immeasurable harm on the health of people. Nothing could ever justify such horrific measures against people, and nothing could justify the death of a child who could simply not have a medical product due to UCMs. Furthermore, we also note the absence of a clear reference to the developed countries' commitment to host countries that receive externally displaced people and provide them with various services, including healthcare, without discrimination. It is essential that UNHCR and other relevant United Nations agencies prioritize antimicrobial resistance in their agendas, especially considering the transborder challenges faced by countries hosting the largest number of refugees or externally displaced persons. As a final point, the Islamic Republic of Iran, under its sovereign rights, governs health policies with its jurisdiction, considering its laws, national programs, and unique economic and social circumstances. Based on this approach, I would like to announce that my country views the political declaration as a non-legally binding voluntary instrument. The Islamic Republic of Iran is not committed to those part of the document that contradict its national prioritized laws, regulations, and cultural and religious norms. Mr. President, to conclude, we decide to join the consensus on the present resolution with understanding that such processes would not set any precedents in future, and similar shortcomings will not happen again. I thank you.
I thank the Islamic Republic of Iran. I give the floor to Brazil.
Brazil subscribes to the G77 China explanation of position. My delegation extends its deep appreciation to the permanent missions of Barbados and Malta for leading the negotiation process concerning document L/79/L.5 in an open and transparent way. They should be commended for employing all efforts to reach a balanced text that spells out commitments and the means to achieve them. We also thank the permanent missions of Uganda and Indonesia for conducting the G77 China through this process. The declaration adequately addresses the challenges faced by the international community in confronting antimicrobial resistance. We underscore, in particular, the language regarding the need for scientific basis in the adoption of measures related to antimicrobial resistance and access to antimicrobial. In our perspective, it is not enough to focus on controlling the use of antimicrobials. We must never forget that one of the main factors contributing to the increase of resistant pathogens is the difficulty for a large portion of the population, especially those marginalized, to have access to quality, safe, effective, and affordable antimicrobials throughout the course of treatment. We also welcome the inclusion of language on universal health coverage, alignment with strategic programs such as HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, strengthening prevention tools such as water, sanitation, and hygiene, immunization, diagnosis, and infection control, strengthening regional production of health supplies, improving multisectoral governance, promoting equity and access to medicines, diagnosis, and health services, improving data quality, and on the need to promote integration among the different sectors involved in tackling the issue. Mr. President, now it is time to fully translate this collective effort into practical actions to achieve the objectives set forth in the political declaration and reduce the number of global deaths caused by antimicrobial resistance, which has its greatest impact in developing countries, women, children, and people in vulnerable situations. In this vein, it is important to take into consideration the different roles and mandates of the relevant international organizations and the authority of their governing bodies. Mr. President, antimicrobial resistance is multifactorial in nature, challenging technological progress made in different areas of human and animal health. It is essential that global efforts for the prevention and control of antimicrobial resistance be combined with those aimed at reducing inequalities, achieving universal health coverage, and eliminating socially determined diseases such as tuberculosis and malaria. In 2024, the Ministry of Health in Brazil launched the Healthy Brazil Program, Programa Brasil Saudável in Portuguese, which aims at eliminating socially determined diseases as public health issues, including tuberculosis. This initiative is aligned with the guidelines and goals of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda and is guided by the reduction of inequalities, the promotion of science, technology, and innovation, among other actions. As stated by our National Secretary of Health and Environmental Surveillance, Etel Maciel, in the general debate of the high-level meeting on AMR, the goals of the political declaration adopted by the GA will only be achieved by means of effective cooperation and solidarity among countries. Brazil reaffirms its commitment to this global effort. In concluding, my delegation stresses that the level of ambition of this political declaration is an important reference and example. It should serve as an inspiration for the bold actions that are necessary to tackle other health problems, such as access to and affordability of medical products, including transparency of prices. Next year, at the high-level meeting on prevention and control of non-communicable diseases, we will need to ensure that we live up to the expectation of a similar level of ambition. I thank you.
I thank Brazil. I give the floor to Switzerland.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Switzerland commends the fact that the United Nations General Assembly has once again, 8 years after the high-level meeting of 2016, placed the theme of antimicrobial resistance on the agenda of its priorities. The commitments entered into during the high-level meeting held at the end of September will make it possible to supplement and strengthen the measures and processes undertaken within the various organizations making up the quadripartite. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the co-facilitators. AMR is one of the key threats to public health and global development. Alongside the international community, Switzerland is committed to preventing the emergence of new resistant pathogens, as well as to limiting their transmission and spread. We're also committed to supporting research into the development of new antibiotics, diagnoses, and preventive tools. As the doctor and researcher Alexander Fleming said, and here I quote, "The more complex the world becomes, the more difficult it is to achieve anything without cooperation from other people." Recognizing the need to adopt a One Health approach is vital if we are to guarantee the coherence and effectiveness of the measures we take. In this connection, last June, Switzerland adopted a One Health action plan against AMR. That plan strengthens the implementation of its national strategy that has been in force since 2016. It also establishes concrete actions and national goals for the years to come. Switzerland fully committed to the negotiation process for the political declaration of 2024 on AMR. We particularly support the creation of an independent panel responsible for collecting evidence regarding measures to take to combat AMR, as well as for defining certain targets. We also welcome the recognition of the merits of certain public-private partnerships such as GARDP and CARB-X for the development of new antimicrobials and the access to them. We are of the view that the approach and procedure selected during the negotiations leading to the declaration were not optimal and did not make it possible to take account of the perspectives of all delegations. We hope that will be approved in the future. We'd also like to underscore that technology transfer is only possible if the owner of a technology decides to agree on such a transfer and accepts the conditions attached to it. We would have much preferred that there be explicit reference to that in the political declaration, and we interpret the relevant passage as referring to a technology transfer which takes place under those conditions. Thank you.
I give the floor to the United Kingdom.
Mr. President, Excellencies, the United Kingdom welcomes the adoption by consensus of the political declaration of the high-level meeting on antimicrobial resistance. We congratulate and thank you, the President of the General Assembly, the UN Secretariat, and especially the permanent representatives of Barbados and Malta and their respective teams for their unwavering leadership throughout the consultation process on the political declaration. As the UK Prime Minister set out in his address to the General Assembly, the UK is committed to responsible global leadership and to working with others to tackle shared challenges. We know that without action, AMR threatens to take 39 million lives by 2025 and wipe $412 billion from the global economy by 2030. We welcome this declaration's commitment to address AMR in humans, animals, and plants through a One Health approach. We applaud its strong mandate for the quadripartite to establish the independent panel for evidence and action on AMR and its support for equitable access to antibiotics, which we know could save 92 million lives. We strongly support the commitment to use antimicrobials in animals and agriculture prudently, in line with Codex and the WOA standards. The commitment to develop guidance to prevent and reduce the use of antimicrobials in plant agriculture, and the focus on disease prevention and investing in health systems. Mr. President, the UK would have liked to see the declaration go further. In particular, in paragraphs 37 and 38, we would have preferred stronger and more specific commitment on sustainable funding for AMR, which we know is critical to meeting our target to reduce AMR deaths by 10%. In paragraph 70, we consider the absence of a time-bound commitment for phasing out medically important antimicrobials for growth promotion in animal agriculture to be a missed opportunity. And we are disappointed that there is no commitment to develop veterinary access, watch, and reserve guidance, which is needed to develop access antibiotic targets. With respect to paragraph 87, the UK believes strongly that the transfer of technology on voluntary and mutually agreed terms is essential, and the UK will continue to promote the activity under these conditions as the principal and most effective means of disseminating innovation. This declaration shows what we can achieve when we work together. It rightly acknowledges that developing countries disproportionately bear the burden of AMR, and that some people and populations are especially vulnerable, including people living in conflict-affected states and territories. To conclude, Mr. President, we look forward to working with you all as we begin the critical work of delivering the commitments set out in this declaration, helping to safeguard our citizens and deliver a more sustainable and prosperous world. I thank you.
I thank the United Kingdom. I give the floor to the United States.
Mr. President, the United States thanks Malta and Barbados for their leadership in finding consensus. The United States is pleased to have joined consensus on the ambitious, action-oriented political declaration of the United Nations General Assembly high-level meeting on antimicrobial resistance. We welcome the adoption of the resolution. The United States works with other governments, non-governmental organizations, the private sector, and other partners to tackle our most pressing challenges to prevent infections and address the emergence, spread, and impact of AMR. We are pleased that the shared efforts of this body produce an action-oriented document that commits to meaningful, ambitious, science, and risk-based targets that are achievable for global efforts to prevent AMR. Though intensified efforts and greater collaboration, we can work toward achieving the Declaration's commitments. We welcome the Declaration's emphasis on sustainably addressing the devastating health and development threat, its focus on access to infection prevention and appropriate care, and attention to innovation and research. The United States remains committed to addressing the needs of vulnerable populations as they are frequently at the highest risk of antimicrobial resistant infections and face significant barriers to accessing timely medical care and treatments. Mr. President, we would like to take this opportunity to clarify U.S. policy positions. It is our view that the United Nations must respect the independent mandates of other processes and institutions, including trade negotiations, and must not comment on decisions and actions in other fora, including the World Trade Organization, WTO. While the United Nations and the WTO share some common interests, they have different roles, rules, and memberships. The United States understands that, with respect to the resolution, references to the transfer of technology and know-how are to be voluntary transfer of technology and know-how on mutually agreed terms. Additionally, we underscore our position that trade language negotiated or adopted by the General Assembly or under its auspices is not binding and has no relevance to the United States trade policy, to our trade obligations or commitments, or to the agenda of the WTO, including discussions or negotiations in that forum. In this vein, the United States disassociates from the language, quote, on, quote, acknowledging the need to remove trade barriers, unquote, in paragraph 82. This language has no standing in future UN negotiations, as trade measures may be necessary to respond to unfair practices that would otherwise distort trade or create dependencies or vulnerabilities. President, colleagues, the full statement clarifying U.S. policy positions can be found online. I would like to conclude with a reminder that no single country, organization, or sector can solve AMR. We must do this together, and everyone must do more. We look forward to continuing and strengthening our collaborations to address the emergence, spread, and impact of AMR. Thank you.
I thank the United States. I give the floor to Peru.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Peru wishes to extend its deepest thanks to the permanent representatives of Barbados and Malta and to their teams for their tireless work in steering these complex negotiations towards a successful conclusion. Moreover, we recognize the invaluable work done by all delegations, in particular by the Permanent Mission of Indonesia. We thank them for their work as coordinator of the G77. Mr. President, as was indicated by the Minister for Health of Peru during the high-level meeting on this matter, Peru recognizes that antimicrobial resistance constitutes one of the greatest threats to global public health. It is a threat which requires urgent, coordinated and sustained action on the part of the international community. The political declaration which we have just adopted is a robust basis on which to strengthen international cooperation in the fight against antimicrobial resistance. This text is the blueprint for our action to achieve a future in which all countries, regardless of their level of income, can protect the health of their citizens in the face of this threat. We welcome the fact that the text makes key references to the importance of strengthening monitoring and early detection capacities. Moreover, the text includes the need to strengthen the responsible use of antimicrobials, guarantee their supply, and having an appropriate network of microbiology labs, which make it possible to produce greater evidence regarding the impact of antimicrobial resistance on human health, animal health, and environmental health. Moreover, it is imperative to have appropriate resource allocation, as stated in the text. It's also important to have international cooperation and technology transfer. Mr. President, for Peru, it's important to underscore the environmental impact of the spread of resistant bacteria and the environmental impact of antibiotic waste on soil and water bodies. All of this has serious consequences for human and animal health. As such, in our view, the political declaration is an invaluable tool to ratchet up efforts in increasing knowledge about and circulating information on the effects of antimicrobial waste on the environment. All countries must urgently develop their own effective strategies tailored to their local realities to tackle this threat, bearing in mind the multi-sectoral impact it has. Mr. President, we also wish to underscore the work of the quadripartite, as well as the fundamental role played by international cooperation in promoting the One Health approach. Peru, with the support of the international community, is working at a national level to strengthen its national systems for animal and public health. Our goal here is to mitigate risks and threats caused by emerging and re-emerging zoonoses as well as endemic zoonoses and antimicrobial resistance. Mr. President, to conclude, we appeal to all Member States to redouble our efforts, our joint efforts indeed, in the fight against this global public health crisis. Peru reaffirms its unwavering commitment to continue actively contributing to international efforts designed to mitigate the impact of antimicrobial resistance and protect the health of our citizens. Thank you.
I thank Peru. I give the floor to the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, the Russian Federation would like to endorse the statement delivered by Venezuela on behalf of the Friends in Defense of the UN Charter on Monday, the 7th of October. In the Russian Federation, antimicrobial resistance is seen as a biological threat in our legislation. We're implementing a whole host of measures so as to protect our people and the environment. In 2017, we adopted a strategy geared towards preventing the spread of AMR out to the year 2030. The strategy is being implemented by the health, veterinary, agricultural, food production, and disease control sectors. Our activities as part of this strategy includes AMR monitoring, control measures targeting AMR use, and in fact currently we have an administrative liability on our books, liability for supplying antibiotics without a prescription. We're also working to reduce the use of antibiotics in veterinary care and agriculture, and on reducing antibiotic content in products of animal origin. We're running awareness-raising and educational campaigns for the populace at large and for experts, including doctors and pharmacists. The Russian Federation is one of the leading countries with low levels of AMR consumption. We're also a world leader in the development of digital technologies for combating AMR. Russia's policies aim to promote studies, the establishment of innovative diagnostics, and the development of new antimicrobial and alternative substances, including vaccines. The Russian Federation is stepping up its efforts in the international arena as well. The Collaborating Center, the WHO Collaborating Center on AMR Study, is continuing its work, which aims to provide assistance to Eastern European and Central Asian countries. Over many years, we've been working very actively on crafting key documents of the Codex Alimentarius Commission. Together with the FAO, starting in 2017, the Russian Federation has been implementing a cooperation project together with the Eastern European and Central Asian countries on AMR. In 2022, we adopted a Commonwealth of Independent States AMR Joint Plan of Action that is on combating AMR. In May of this year, in Moscow, we convened the first BRICS International Conference on AMR, which is something that's also reflected in the new political declaration. The implementation of the outcome document of the second high-level meeting on AMR will require us to pool our efforts to combat the resistance to antimicrobials. The Russian Federation supports this political declaration and is hopeful that it will be effectively implemented and its objectives will be met. Having said that, we'd like to draw your attention, much like other delegations, to the fact that it's unacceptable to impose unilateral coercive measures, which are thwarting our efforts to prevent the spread of AMR. I thank you.
I thank the Russian Federation. I give the floor to Canada.
Thank you, Mr. President. Canada would like to thank the co-facilitators, Barbados and Malta, for their excellent leadership in the negotiations of this political declaration on AMR. We welcome that the political declaration outlines the importance, 1, of using a One Health approach to address AMR, 2, of the need for equitable access to antimicrobials, vaccinations, and diagnostics, 3, that stewardship programs, infection prevention, and control measures, as well as integrated surveillance, are critical, and 4, that national contexts must be considered when implementing AMR actions. We also support the proposal for the quadripartite to establish an independent panel for evidence on AMR and look forward to participating in member state consultations on the composition, mandate, scope, and deliverables of this mechanism. The declaration provides us with a clear path to collectively address this global health threat through a multi-sectoral approach that includes whole-of-society engagement. Canada was therefore very pleased to join consensus on this text with only one reservation. Canada cannot support paragraph 87 related to technology transfer, as it does not include the qualifiers, quote, on voluntary and mutually agreed terms, unquote, or, quote, consistent with national law and policy, unquote. As we have stated throughout the negotiation process, the paragraph 87 language raises concerns about the ability of member states to promote technology transfer on terms and conditions other than voluntary and mutually agreed terms. We thank the co-facilitators once again and look forward to working with partners and member states in the years to come to advance our collective efforts to combat AMR. I thank you.
I thank Canada. I give the floor to Ukraine.
Thank you, Mr. President. The delegation of Ukraine has aligned itself with the statement on behalf of the European Union and would like to highlight some issues in our national capacity. We join others in thanking Malta and Barbados for their efforts in the work on the political declaration on AMR. Ukraine remains a strong advocate for global efforts aimed at addressing the urgent challenge of antimicrobial resistance, which poses a significant threat to public health worldwide. During the negotiation process, Ukraine consistently underscored the importance of inclusivity in such efforts. We have specifically emphasized that referencing conferences and events not widely attended by UN member states is inappropriate, as it undermines the spirit of collective global action. Notably, the only member state mentioned in the text as the host of such a conference is the Russian Federation, which this General Assembly has recognized as an aggressor state. We are therefore deeply concerned that in the latest version of the political declaration presented during the first silence procedure, this reference was included without providing member states sufficient opportunity for a full discussion. Considering this, we remind the General Assembly that since the Russian Federation launched its war against Ukraine, it has inflicted devastating damage on Ukraine's healthcare infrastructure, particularly in the most affected war regions. A total over 1,800 healthcare facilities have been damaged, over 200 destroyed, and 47 civilian healthcare workers have lost their lives, with 177 injured. Hospitals face challenges maintaining infection prevention and control, crucial in preventing the spread of antimicrobial resistance. Key issues include overwhelmed hospitals, limited staff, the spread of AMR pathogens as patients move along medical evacuation routes, overuse and misuse of antibiotics, disrupted water and sanitation services, difficulty maintaining hygiene in crowded areas, and worsening pre-existing weaknesses like delays or poor quality microbiological testing. These Russian Federation's actions have not only compromised Ukraine's public health efforts, but also disrupted access to essential medicines, creating conditions that may exacerbate the spread of antimicrobial resistance within the region. At the same time, while continuing its invasion, Russia has engaged in disinformation campaigns that erode global trust in public health cooperation. False claims regarding the presence of secret biological laboratories in Ukraine are just one example of how much disinformation sows confusion and undermines international efforts to address critical health issues. To suggest that Russia is a key contributor to global health while it continues these destabilizing actions presents a false and harmful narrative. Ukraine reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the global fight against AMR. We firmly believe that international cooperation must be grounded in truth, transparency, and respect to the integrity of global health initiatives. It is crucial that member states recognize the actions of each country in either supporting or undermining these efforts. Our response to AMR must be based on facts and a shared understanding of the real challenges we face. Thank you.
I thank Ukraine. I give the floor to Japan.
Mr. President, Japan welcomes the adoption of the political declaration of the high-level political forum on AMR by consensus. We would also like to extend our deep appreciation for the dedicated efforts of the co-facilitators, Malta and Barbados, as well as the able leadership of both the former and current presidents of the General Assembly. We are facing mounting obstacles as the world grapples with complex and interrelated crises, and the international community is being increasingly divided. The political declaration on AMR, adopted after overcoming many differences of opinion, represents our strong and unwavering commitment to a stronger, transparent partnership between the public and private sectors, as well as academia. With that said, we regret that towards the end of the negotiations, we saw a rush to push a final draft without sufficient consultations, resulting in a missed opportunity to build shared understanding on some specific policy issues, including on technology transfer in paragraph 87 in particular. In this regard, Japan would like to reiterate the importance of the basic concept that technology transfer should be conducted on voluntary and mutually agreed terms, since technologies are in many cases property of private sectors, and it is not acceptable that transfer of those technologies is forced by any party. Therefore, transfer of technology should be voluntary. Transfer of technology should be conducted upon consent of parties. Therefore, transfer of technology should be on mutually agreed terms. Mr. President, the adoption of the declaration is not an end, but the midpoint of the 2030 agenda. Japan will continue to strengthen our best efforts toward the achievement of the SDGs. Thank you.
I thank Japan. We have heard the last speaker in explanation of vote after the vote. I wish to express my sincere thanks to His Excellency Francois Jackman, Permanent Representative of Barbados, and Her Excellency Vanessa Frazier, Permanent Representative of Malta, who ably and patiently conducted the discussions and complex negotiations in the informal consultations on this draft resolution. I am sure members of the Assembly join me in extending to them our sincere appreciation. The exercise of the right of reply has been requested. May I remind members that statements in the exercise of the right of reply are limited to 10 minutes for the first intervention and to 5 minutes for the second intervention, and should be made by delegations from their seats. I call on the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, I am compelled to take the floor to exercise a right of reply. On the 26th of September, the Ukrainian delegation used the high-level meeting on AMR exclusively for the purpose of spreading the lies and allegations leveled at my country. But on top of that, here in the General Assembly of the United Nations, we are unfortunately compelled to note yet another attempt by Ukraine to politicize as much as is possible the adoption of the outcome document of that high-level meeting. Ukraine's actions today does nothing but undermine the pooling of global efforts geared towards preventing the spread of AMR. It is at odds with the principles of strengthening and enhancing cooperation in this sphere. It is necessary, this cooperation, if we are to achieve tangible progress on tackling this contemporary challenge, AMR that is. As for violations by the Ukrainian regime, violations of international law and the regime's inhumane policy vis-à-vis their own people and other peoples as well, our delegation will continue drawing attention to this, but we'll be using other fora, including the Security Council. Thank you for your kind attention.
No more requests.
The General Assembly has thus concluded this stage of its consideration of Agenda Item 127. I now suspend the meeting for 10 minutes to allow for the completion of the counting of ballots. The meeting is suspended.